Hello everyone, and today I'm going to talk to you about the open shank ring. Some people have problems, even though it's an easy ring to make, but some of us have some problems to finish it. So I'm going to go over these areas and how you can avoid them. So don't go away so you could see everything I'm talking about. My name is Eli Ganim, and welcome to EG Lapidar. So let's start first with cutting the shank, and you can cut it to any size close to the size of ring that you need. And to get that size, like I showed you on the previous video that I did last week, was getting the inside diameter plus the middle thickness of your ring. Then you multiply it by 3.14, which is pi, and that will give you the length of your shank. So you cut it roughly to that size, and then and I'm going to show you what we're going to do here. So the for the open shank, we got different style that we could use. We have. Okay, let me try to do it here. Show you. So let's say the first style is you get it, cut that so you get your diameter is here, and what you're going to do now is you're going to flatten the top right there, and put your bezel. So now we're going to end up with something like this. Now I'm going to show you how you're going to do this one here properly, but this is one style. The other style is where you actually will go straight up and you're going to have your bezel like so. This way. And the third one is you basically gonna go on the side. So you will go straight up and your bezel will be inside like that. Now, so there's other styles than just this, but this is just to start with, and then we can go from there. One thing that we have to watch is the position. What I mean by position is how you're going to set your base plate and the bezel on it. So if we have an imaginary line, which is center line, let's call this is the center line right here, which is perpendicular to each other. When you file this, so assuming this is cut here, like we said. So this is, you already have it shorter, you don't need this much. So we have it here, this is cut out. Like that. Now, in order to set the bezel properly and not crooked, you have to have the base parallel to this center line. What I mean by parallel, that the distance from here to here on both ends here and there are equal. So this line is supposed to be parallel to the center line and also perpendicular. So this is 90 degree to the base. So when you have that base like that, this is my, then the ring will be good. Okay, 90 degree, so this has to be perpendicular to the base, and it has to be parallel to the other one. So this has to go on all of them. So same with this one here, this is almost the same like that. This is flat, so these two faces here, it has to be also parallel to the center line. So if I have the base of my ring shank here, that has to be actually parallel to that center line. Like that. Same with this one here. So that's very important, because if you don't do it that way, when you put the ring on, what happens is it looks crooked. So now, if we get it parallel, and we get the right position, what we need to do is make sure that we have enough surface for soldering. Okay, this is another problem where I'm going to show you on this particular one here, where you have a split. Sometimes you have, you know, 2 prongs on the side, and you have, sometimes you get 3, which is similar to this or that. So what happened here? If I'm going to grind this here, I need to have a nice surface here in order to and it has to be parallel also. So I gotta have a nice surface in order to put my my solder in and have a good connection here. The other other problem that we face is sometimes, okay, we figured out our diameter, which is this, but when we finish the shank and we solder it together, then we find a problem that the ring is too tight, so it's not the right size, or it's too big. But why this is happening? Okay, if I cut just a little bit on the top, or if I'm doing it this way, so now my shank is up. My diameter is basically at this point here. So if I go around, I'm here. This is my, the circumference of my ring size. All of a sudden now, I increase this, but I didn't make up for that much distance down here. And what happened, I got a bigger distance, a longer distance. So the size here is okay, but the ring is higher on this direction. So that gives me a bigger ring. So now the ring is loose. The other way around, if I go in and I say, okay, well, I'm going to cut this one right here. Let me, where's the other one? So So I'm going to cut this one here. So all of a sudden now, you don't notice this, but what you got is the distance is shorter. So once you cut it below your rad or the size of your ring, you go down, all of a sudden you have a shorter distance from here to there. Now your ring is too tight. So one of the things you gotta watch, especially if you're doing something like that, or even something like this, you're going on the side, how can you do it and make sure that you're not gonna go higher or lower than the size of your ring? So what you do is use your ring mandrel. You have a ring mandrel, use it. Take your shank. You could put it in. Take your bezel, and make sure that you're still on size. Whether you cut it, if you're higher in this here or you're higher here, make sure you lower it. If you're too low here, then you cannot fix that. So when you cut it, before you cut it, make sure that you are at the right size, especially with this one here. With this one here, make sure that if you're gonna go right at the bottom, right here at this point, you're already short. So you need to be, when this one comes roughly here, it's an imaginary point. So you make sure that you're gonna cut it. So this is gonna be your lowest cut, right here. And now you make sure that the size of your ring is gonna stay the same. Now, if it becomes a little bit shorter, well, then that's fine. You could also hammer it and increase the size of your ring. But if it's too much, like this one here, you can't use it. It's going to be a smaller size. So if we cut it to this, so now I have this right there, here, like this. I think if I use my hand, it's even better. Okay, so you end up with these points here. Okay, now your bezel is somewhere around this level here, like this. Okay, so this is your bezel. You still have this, so you can't keep these sharp corners here, because if you're going to put it in your finger, you need it smoother. So before even you solder the bezel, you have to round these off. Make sure these are nice and rounded, so when you put it in, it will not scratch your fingers. Okay, so we know that if we do it too far here, it's going to go down. If this is too high, it's going to be too big. And same with this one here. You put the mandrel in, and then you could figure out your distance and where you're going to solder this. Okay, same with the edges here. You still need to figure out how you're going to do the ends here. You don't want it to be sticking out. Okay, so it could be rounded off, could be sharp, or just right into the edge. But you could figure that out, no big deal. Now, here's another problem where we have split rings like that on the top, and you have 4 points, 2 points on each side, or 6. It doesn't matter how many you're going to, but I'm thinking 4 just to make it easy for now. If you have 4 surfaces that you need to solder at the base plate, or on the base plate, it's the same thing like when you go to a restaurant and you're sitting on the table and the whole table is rocking and it's moving. So what do? So you go ahead and take a napkin and you try to shove it under the one of the legs to level your table. Well, this is the same way, but here you can't put a napkin on there because you need to solder it. It has to be in contact with the base. So there's two problems with this. One, if they're not all even at the same level, you're going to have one off that's not going to solder properly, or it's not going to solder at all. And that it will eventually break. And then you figure out, like, what did I do wrong here? Because it's breaking, but I did 100 times I made these rings, and now all of a sudden it just start to come off. Well, because they're not even. So you got to have them equally even. The other thing is, this is a surface that we gonna use to solder. And if the surface is too narrow, I mean, if I look at this ring here, now this ring is very small. I would say maybe about less than a millimeter. It's half round. Each one is half round, and I would say it's about 1 millimeter at the highest point. But even then, if you need good space, or what I call it, real estate. You need a good real estate surface in order to solder the shank onto the base plate. So if this is good enough for you, that's great. You could leave it. If not, then you need to go with this direction, which you get 4 now. So the more you curve in, the more surface you're going to have here. If you spread it open and you get it straight up, that looks like this, you might not have enough. Okay? So it depends on the thickness, on the surface that you have. And so you got to look and weigh everything that you're doing in order at the end you got a very strong connection between the shank and between the base plate. So now we talked about a few things here. Why it gets short or smaller than the size that you actually wanted, or why it gets bigger than the size you wanted. And the reason is that this is when you open it, your shank is bigger than what you need. And this one here, when you cut it below the surface or the circumference of your ring. The other thing is, we talked about to have it parallel, so position, it has to be parallel to the center line or perpendicular. So these two center lines are 90 degrees to each other. So yours has to be right in the center. The opening has to be adjusted properly. So you don't have it this way, and all of a sudden when you cut it, it's already on an angle. The mandrel, I don't know about if all of them has that. I think they do. There's a center line that's shown right here. And let me get close to this here. And you could see there is a center line right here. And this center line, you could keep it and put it straight and make sure that the two ends here are centered, or the line will be centered between the two sides or the opening that you have. Then, once you get to this point, then you can file this one straight. So they make sure that it's flat. After you file this, you go in on a sandpaper and flat surface, and you go in and you just make sure that both surfaces in this case, or the four surfaces in this one here, that they're all flush or flat. How to do that is use your marker and your black marker or Sharpie and highlight the ends with black. Once you file all of them flat, you will see there is no more color or black Sharpie on them. And then this way you know that you are good. Okay, so these are simple things to fix, but you gotta know about it. If you don't know about all this, you will end up with the problem we're talking about. So these two here, this one there, most of the time is if you don't make sure that you have the mandrel in and adjust that surface, you're going to be higher or even lower, you know. So make sure you have in when you adjust this. Okay, so what I did here, I did a couple of rings, one with split ring and one is just one ring. Let me show you this here. There you get these two here. You can see them right there. But anyway, so these are the two rings I'm using, and then I'm gonna put them on my mandrel and get them to size and file them. So the next thing I'm gonna show you how to do this to get it to the right size, and then you file them down. Okay, here I got the bezel, and like I mentioned before, I had these bezel. Once they're soldered and they're done, I do polish them. I like to polish if I can at every step, so it makes it easy at the end. I got a better polish. So this one here, I'm gonna use this ring here, and it's gonna go basically right there. Now, if I look at it this way, if I leave it like this, I'm right at the edge of my ring. So this one here, I already measured it, and it's size 8. I got size 8 right here. However, if I leave it like this, what's going to happen is I have the point at the bottom of this, just the edge right there is hitting. So if I'm going to say, yeah, well, I can solder it like that, I got a problem. I cannot solder it like that. So the real estate that I'm talking about is not there at all, so it will not solder. So sometimes you go in and you put your solder below it, hoping that it's going to join the two. That's not going to work. So when I have it here, all I need to do is make sure that this is centered, so the openings are centered, and if I file this, I have to file it flat. So if I hold it like this and I go in and I file flat, I gotta file all four at the same level. Okay, so here I'm not gonna just use this one here, but just to show you. Right now, if I put it in, I know I have all 4 points are touching. Remember the table I talked about? You know, that if you have one leg is off, you know, the whole thing moves. Well, this here is, I know it's flat. I know all 4 are touching, but however, I didn't file enough yet. Another thing you gotta look at it in this direction. So the ring, it's not tilted. So if you take file more on one side than the other, so it might be tilted this way or that way. You gotta look at that too. You want all 4 exactly parallel to each other. You know, one of the things you could do is, if I have, let's see if I could use this one here. So if you fit it in, you lock it in position, make sure it's centered. Okay. And you go down and you're hitting all 4 points, and then you go in and you sand it off. So let's try that and see how that's going to work. I need a sandpaper, and I know I have some here because I used them. Here's right there. Okay. So this is 500 grit. I'm going to use this one here. Take that out. So you put it on a flat surface. Make sure that your ring it's nice and straight and balanced. So now if I go making I still need a little bit on this side. So adjustment is it's very important that you gotta adjust everything here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to try to take it on my sander and try to get it exactly 90 degrees to each other, and I shall be back. Okay, I'll be back. I got to do it on the sander, which I got it set up, and I'll be back. Okay, now I did this, send it down, just to see, that looks perfect. Here, so if I have all 4, you could actually see the distance or the surface that I have right here. Can you see that? Okay, here it is. And the surface, all 4 of them are equal, and it should be good enough. And when I solder, then I'm sure they all gonna be perfect, right where I want them. So here you are. It's gonna be like this. Just like that. So this one here, it's straight on this side, it's, if I look at it, it's coming down exactly perpendicular to the base, and if I put it from this direction, it's right in the center, also and perpendicular to the base. So this one here is done. All I have to do now is solder. So when I solder this here, there's one thing that I like to do. I like to go and sweat solder the ring, and the reason for that, sweat soldering, it keeps the base clean. So you know when you put the solder pellets or flakes that you put in, it leaves a mark. If you could see it here, this one has the mark on the inside, even though you can clean it, but you don't need to waste your time cleaning the inside here. I mean, you clean it as much as you can, but if it's on the outside, then you need to clean it. And when it's right between the ring shank and the base, it's very hard to get right below there and try to work it out. So with sweat solder is you just put it on top, and you know there's solder in there. You hold it in position, and then you just solder it. So this is one here. Now the other one, which is this, I have a shank that is solid shank with some patterns on it that I need to actually cut or get it to size. Right now it's about 6.5, but I need this one to be a little bit larger. I need also to make it as 8, so I can go 8 or 7.5, and then what I need to do is maybe hammer it to get it to the proper size that I want. So by doing that, I make sure it's rounded properly. Here about just a little bit below 8, so you take it, you turn it around, and you do the same thing. Okay? So, and it doesn't take long to do that, so you got to watch it. So right now we are exactly about 8. So right now what I have to do is make sure that the opening is centered, like I said, in the mandrel center line that's given here, and this is good the way it is. And now all I have to do is file this. So if I use the file, and just it will give me the startup. Here we are. Now remember that the easiest way to keep the size that you want is not to leave it high, or you cut it lower than the mandrel. So by using the mandrel here, I know I'm not going to touch, or I'm going to go cut too far in. So I'll be just about right. Now, as I told you before, I do use my sander, which makes it a lot easier than just to file. Now, you could file it, but it's going to take a little bit longer to do so, and you got to watch how you do it. So I'm going to take it again to my sander and try to keep it as flat as possible. So now I got the size in between that I like, Um, I know it's 8 here. All I have to do is give that flat or real estate to solder. So I'm going to do it, and I'll be back. I'll show you how I'm done. Okay, so this is, I got this one sanded down, and you can see here, just sand it down. And now what I have to do is put it flat and see how this is gonna look like. You know, it has to sit and it touches everywhere. Okay, there you go. This is 8. This is perfect here. And then all I have to do is get it. Now if I take this and see, okay, so right now that looks good, and I know that if I put it on like so, it looks straight and even. So once you do that, then you can go ahead and solder. So we're saying wet soldering. So you wet solder it and then you put it on and you do this. So okay, I'm gonna go and to the welding station, and I'm gonna wet solder these two, solder them on the shank, clean them actually first, make sure that they are clean, they're don't have any oil from my hand, and then we go from there. So now I'm going to take these the 2 shanks, and I'm going to put them in the boric acid. This is one here. Oops. Just okay. This is the ready flux. I'll put some on the top here. And Okay, now and these two, I'll have to put them in the boric acid. So you need to take your time just to get them exactly right. Like we said, perpendicular and parallel to the center. So now these are set, so I can go ahead and do both of them. That looks good. And this also looks perfect. I'm just going to put them in the acid and clean them up. Okay, so now they're already soldered. What we did is we sweat solder the shank, we put it on, and we made sure that it's soldered properly. One thing that I just want to mention, that when you solder and you see the solder start to flow, most people just take the flame out and they stop soldering, but don't do that. Just stay around it. Make sure that actually the solder did flow on both sides, and you'd be able to see it. So don't just, as soon as you see it melting, you just take out the torch right away. Just stay with it, keep an eye on it, make sure that actually is bonded between the two pieces. Okay, so I'm going to clean them up, and then I'm going to show you how they look like. Okay, so the two rings are already done. The shank is already in on both of them. And what I did is I cleaned the inside in order not to have any uh, grabbing or any sharp corner here. Actually, this one I need to do it a little bit more. This here, this is not bad. But then after I finish this one here, I gotta go and polish the whole thing. Once they're polished, then I can set them up. So here I'm gonna give you a closer look on these two shanks here. So this is one right there, and here's the other one. That, okay, here it is right there. I hope you can see it. But anyway, this is the way. So remember that in order to get the right sizes, you need to make sure, like I discussed before, is where the base plate is gonna fit in relationship to the mandrel. And then if it's get a little bit shorter or smaller in size, you can always enlarge it by putting it back in and hammer it, and that will fix it. So now, like I said, this year I'm gonna finish polishing, and then I'm gonna set it up. I'm probably gonna put some pictures on Facebook, so if you wanna see them while they're finished, then you can see them on Facebook. I hope you liked that video, and if you did, just give it the thumbs up, and you can comment, and like I said before, I do reply on every comments that I got. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell on the side, and if you do, you will get notified every time I post a video. You will get notified right away. So I hope you like it, enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.